Some of the best things in this world have very small beginnings. I think that's something and a truth that we can all recognize. And some of the smallest things in this world have the greatest impact. And some of you are just staring at that screen. He put a spider up on that screen. Sometimes little things may not be the most appealing of things, and they may just creep you out. Sometimes you might look at a spider and you might overreact just a little bit. I don't know to what extent you do to get spiders out of your car. Maybe you don't set it on fire. But I found that picture on the internet today. There was a spider in my car, but I think it's gone. Regardless of how you handle some of these creepy crawlies, it's important for us to remember that we need to look at the little things. It's the small things in life that sometimes have the greatest import. When we look at our lives, sometimes it's not the big events, it's the small things that we remember and that we treasure the most. In Proverbs chapter 30, verses 24 through 28, appreciate Tim reading that for us a moment ago. There are 4 things which are little upon the earth, but are exceedingly wise: ants, conies, rock badgers, hyraxes. We'll talk about those when we get there. The locust and the spider. Some things you take for granted, some things you just may not like at all. The 2 most hated animals on this planet are spiders and snakes. And I say spider, snake, some of you just go like this. But the Proverbs writer says that there were good things that we could learn from some of these animals as we stop to look at them. So what I want us to do tonight is to examine them and take a moment and look at them the way the Proverbs writer intended, and see what can we learn from each one of these individual critters that may benefit us, hopefully, as Christians. The first thing we want to do is we want to look at, and go in the order that the writer did. The ants are a people not strong, yet they prepare their meat in the summer. An ant can lift several times its own body weight in whatever it is they're moving. They are very industrious. One of the coolest things I've ever seen on the internet, which is full of obviously very cool things. But there's a YouTube video of a guy who makes casts of ant hills. He takes a big mound of fire ants and he pours molten aluminum down in this thing. And then he digs it up, which does 2 good things, right? It gets rid of fire ants and it produces sculpture. And how massive just these little bitty fire ants have made something 4 or 5 feet deep, 3 or 4 or 5 feet across. And it's just absolutely beautiful and complex, the amount of real estate these ants are able to create underground or in your house maybe, which is not so great for us, but we understand how industrious they are. Every summer we get ants in our house. I don't know why. It's probably because we have a dog and some kids, and I'm not sure which creates more mess, but you know, I don't care how microscopic that speck of food is, there is a trail of ants to and from it. They thrive and they survive and they work. Other places in Proverbs especially, the ants are praised for their industry. We're all familiar with how much and how well they work. They are a people not mighty, a people not strong. They are small, but they are mighty. 1 Samuel chapter 17, I hope this is a passage we're familiar with. But in 1 Samuel chapter 17, beginning in verse 42, and then the Philistine, whose name was Goliath, looked about and saw David. He disdained him, for he was but a youth and ruddy and fair of countenance. Verse 48, and when it came to pass, when the Philistine arose and drew nigh to meet David, that David hastened and ran toward the army to meet this Philistine. And David put his hand in his bag and took out a stone, and slang it and smote the Philistine in the forehead. That stone sunk into his forehead, and he fell upon his face. Here is a small man taking on a mighty man. God's people were always in the minority, yet they were able to do great and remarkable things. We look at Judges chapter 7. And the Lord said unto Gideon. Now, do you have an idea of what's going on in Judges chapter 7? Gideon is preparing his army to go out and to destroy the Midianites whom have taken over the land. One of those cycle of things that happened in the book of Judges. And God is whittling his army down little bit by little bit, and this is that final straw. Gideon, I want you to take the men to get water. The men that bow their head down to the water and pay no attention to their surroundings, those guys you get rid of. The men who bring the water up to their faces and look around and are aware of what's going on, those are the men you keep. And the Lord said unto Gideon, verse 7, by 300 men that lapped will I save you, and deliver the Midianites into your hand. Now let every man go to his place. 300 men led by Gideon, who was a man of God, following God's direction, were able to beat the host of the Midianites. We could talk about Joseph being the least of his brethren. We could talk about Zacchaeus being a wee little man. We talk about so many others. Small but mighty. How many insignificant people do very significant things? The world is full of those folks. I love stories of people like Steve Jobs and others who start in their garage and end up doing great things. What we call insignificant things can end up being great and huge and mighty. Not only do small things do mighty deeds, but these ants work hard all season to provide, to make sure they are industrious, they labor hard. Galatians 6, 8, and 9. For he that soweth to his flesh, or the flesh, shall also reap corruption. But he that soweth to the Spirit shall the Spirit reap life everlasting. Let us not be weary in well-doing, for in due season we shall reap if we faint not. I've never seen an ant faint or give up. When I was little, I used to take it, there's a line of ants, and you put a stick, or you put a rock or something. And they don't know what to do. But you know what they find a way around it, and they keep going on. Now, there was a Pixar movie, I think, that came out a long time ago named Bugs or Bug's Life or something. There's ants in charge of just plotting new directions around fallen sticks. I didn't know that till the time. But however they do it, they won't be stopped. They are going to work and produce as long as they're able. Let us be weary. Let us not be weary in our well-doing. Do we work the way the ants do? Jesus said, I must work the works of him that sent me while it is day. The night cometh with no man can work. Are we working when we have chance? Paul said, therefore, my beloved brethren, 1 Corinthians chapter 15, be ye steadfast, unmovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that your labor is not in vain in the Lord. We have a labor to do, and like the ants, we should be about it. We should be as industrious as an ant. You're like, I don't like ants. Well, you don't have to get along with them. You don't have to keep them in your home. But the next time you see one, it ought to impress you what those ants are able to do, the community that they are able to build, the amount that they are able to carry, the work that they do ought to be there as an inspiration to us as Christians. If these things, some of the least of all of God's creation, can labor this way, shouldn't we be able to as well? Maybe ants creep you out, but there's something to think about. And sometimes I wonder, why did God put this on this earth? I still wonder about ticks and chiggers. It's one of those things I want to ask when I get to heaven, why? Why are there ticks? I don't know. And I'm sure God has a purpose for them. Why are there ants? Maybe the purpose is for us to be able to look at them and to get some respect, some perspective, some inspiration. If the least of God's creatures can do this, what can man that was created just a little lower than the angels, what can he accomplish? What can you and I do in our lives if the ants can do this? Let's take a minute and talk about how many people know what a Hyrax is? How many people have heard the word Hyrax for the first time this evening? Yeah, pretty much. The King James has the word coney. So I've told y'all this before, but I read Proverbs. I read a chapter a day, and the conies, and I read it. Coney means rabbit, right? So I built a whole point for this sermon on rabbit. And I said, you know what, I'm just going to click on this just to make sure this is what's not a rabbit at all. That's why that thing don't have no ears. Maybe your translation has the word rock badger. I think that's what Tim read a moment ago. Some of them have the word Hyrax. Well, in case you've never seen one, I had never seen one before, this is what a Hyrax looks like. This guy looks cute, but these guys here with their eyebrows, man, I don't know, they look kind of mean. They're about this big. They're a cross between a groundhog and a prairie dog. These things live in the rocks over in Palestine. They're called Eastern or Ethiopian Hyraxes. They got teeth. I don't want to be attacked by a group of Hyraxes, even though they're this big. But you know what a groundhog is, right? You get close to a groundhog, what does it do? It runs for its burrow. They like prairie dogs. One will be on lookout the whole time. So there's a bunch of these things. They live in clusters. They live in little Hyrax herds. And there's 20 or 30 of them milling around, and one is on watch. And as soon as he spots something, he barks or chatters or meows or whatever they do. Never heard of one. He lets out an alert, and the rest of them scamper and hide. They don't just dig in the earth, they dig in the rocks. To the point where there's rocks on top of the burrow where a coyote or a Palestinian wolf cannot dig them out. So now you know what a Hyrax is. Next time somebody asks you, do you know what this is? Yes, I do. It's your National Geographic moment of the evening. But now that we know what a rock badger or a King James coney or a Hyrax is, let's talk about how they are described. The conies or the Hyraxes are but a feeble folk, yet they make their houses in the rocks. A prairie dog or a groundhog is not what you would call a superior mammal like a horse. That's something there now. Deer, that's something. What's a groundhog? They are but a feeble folk, yet they build their houses. They make their houses among the rock. They are very watchful of danger. 2 Timothy 4 and verse 5, but watch thou in all things, Paul tells Timothy. Endure afflictions, do the work of an evangelist, and make full proof of thy ministry. Watch thou in all things. Be as watchful and as diligent as a Hyrax. Guarantee you didn't think you were going to hear that when you showed up tonight. Be as watchful as a groundhog. We have two. We used to have three that live right here on the church building property. And they see me when I get in my truck and I leave on the afternoons when I head out. And as soon as I make that curve coming up the hill, they scamper down into that hole. They are very watchful of my approach. They know exactly what I'm doing, and they don't want me to get close to them. Be as watchful as a Hyrax. Along those lines, we go to Ezekiel chapter 3. And this is what he was made. Son of man, I have made thee a watchman unto the house of Israel. Therefore hear the word of my mouth, and give them warning from me. When I say unto the wicked, you shall surely die, if you do not give them warning or speak to them, his blood will I require at thy hands. Yet if thou warn the wicked, and he turn not from his wickedness, and he turn not nor from his wicked way, he shall die in his iniquity, but thou hast delivered thy soul. When a righteous man doth turn from his righteousness and commit iniquity, and I lay a stumbling block, he shall die, because thou hast not given him warning. You go down to the bottom, because he is warned also thou hast delivered thy soul. I have made thee a watchman to the house of Israel, just like one of these Hyraxes would sit and watch out for the rest of them that are there. We need to be our brother's keepers. We need to watch out for our own souls to make sure that we're avoiding sin, to make sure that we're walking in the light and we're maintaining righteousness with God. And we need to watch out for those in the fold around us, for our Christian brothers and sisters, to warn them of danger, to be watchmen unto this new spiritual Israel, which is the church of our Lord. And when there is danger, they are quick to strong shelter. Remember, they make their homes in the rocks. Proverbs 18 and verse 10, the name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous runneth into it and is safe. When we see danger, do we flee for the Lord? The safety of the Scriptures. That foundation that's built upon Him, 1 Corinthians 6 and verse 18. Paul, talking about some very specific sin here with this congregation at Corinth, he said, flee fornication. Every sin a man does without the body, but that committeth fornication, sins against his own body. That word flee in chapter 6 and verse 18 is that same kind of idea that we're given here in Proverbs chapter 30. The conies are but a feeble folk, make their houses in the rocks, and they flee there, is the implication, when there is danger. Do we flee scamper, skedaddle, get gone, vamoose when there's trouble? Do we seek the safety of Scriptures? Do we seek the safety of being around our brothers and sisters in Christ? Do we seek God in prayer when times are difficult? Do we help to warn others? We ought to be as watchful and as quick to avoid sin as the hyrax is of danger. What about the locust? The locusts have no king, yet they go forth, all of them by bands. Locusts travel commonly together. Now, we really don't have locusts as it is in this country. We have grasshoppers, and we all know what a grasshopper is. Imagine a big grasshopper and about 1 billion of them at once. Well, there's your locust. In Acts chapter 2, we see folks who have obeyed the gospel on the day of Pentecost. Verse 41 tells us about 3,000 souls were added to the church that day. And they continued steadfastly in the apostles' doctrine and fellowship and the breaking of bread and in prayers. Fear, respect came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were done by the apostles. And all that believed were together and had all things common. They sold their possessions and good and parted them to all men as every man had need. And they, continuing daily with one accord in the temple and breaking the bread from house to house, did eat their meat with gladness and singleness of heart. In Acts chapter 13, one of Paul's missionary journeys, as he starts out, he's traveling with Barnabas and others. In Acts chapter 13, just notice how it's phrased. Now when Paul and his company had loosed from Paphos, they came to Persia and Pamphylia. John departed from there in Pamphylia and headed back towards Jerusalem. Paul and his company, they were traveling commonly together, groups of Christians going out into the world. Just like a swarm of locusts, only this is a good thing, right? Swarms of locusts we generally see as bad things. Plagues in Egypt, kind of bad things. But imagine a swarm of Christians going out into the world. A swarm of Christians that just go out and land on an area and do great amounts of good for the kingdom of Christ. I hadn't really thought about it that way until we boarded the plane for Jamaica back in July. And we all got these yellow shirts on, right? And we had this flight attendant. He was a funny guy. And he just said, hey, what are y'all doing with all these yellow shirts on? It says, Arnold Church of Christ, Medical Mission, Montego Bay, whatever it says. He said, y'all are minions from Christ. Because, all the minions in the movie, they're these yellow people, and we all got these we're minions for Christ. Just a swarm of people going about doing His business. And I said, I know what next year's shirt's going to say. But I hadn't really thought about it that way until this flight attendant, this fellow pointed it out to me. I'm like, yeah, we are. Just a swarm of people going out with a singular mission to go and to do the work of the Lord. That's what we ought to be doing as Christians. They have no king, yet they go out by bands. We do have a king. Shouldn't we even be more organized? Shouldn't we even more so have a singleness of purpose? They don't have a king, and look what they can do. Look at the unison that they have. Matter of fact, they are a swarm of ones. Now let's read some passages, and then maybe I'll try to explain that a little bit better. In John chapter 15, Jesus says, henceforth I call you not servants, for the servant knoweth what his Lord doeth. But I have called you friends, for all things I have heard from my Father. That's verse 15. Let's go back to chapter 15 and verse number 1. I am the true vine. That sounds much better. And my Father is the husbandman. Every branch in me that beareth not fruit is taken away. And every branch that beareth fruit, He purgeth it, that it may bring forth more fruit. There we go. Now we are clean through the word which I have spoken unto you. Abide in me as I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit of itself, except it abide in the vine, no more can ye, except you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Every grapevine, I got 3 in my backyard. It's a singular vine, but it has all these different branches. Jesus is the true vine. Christians branch off from that. Part of the same thing. Ephesians chapter 2, beginning in verse 19. Paul says, now therefore you are no more strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the saints and of the household of God, and are built upon the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Jesus Christ Himself being the chief cornerstone, in whom all the building fitly framed together. Now this building is made out of sticks, right? Lumber. It's made out of sheetrock. It's made out of metal. It's made out of concrete. It's made out of bricks and glass and all sorts of stuff. And it takes all of those things being together, completely united to make a building. Have you ever watched a swarm of locusts on television, or you've seen a flock of birds that just oscillate, move every different way? It's like they're all plugged in together. You ever watch those schools of fish on the Discovery Channel? Swimming away, and here comes a shark, and the whole school at once turns and moves. It's like a living entity in and of itself. If the locusts can do that have no king, can't we be better? Cannot the church move together as one united entity with one singular purpose? Oh, look at what the locust can do. And maybe grasshoppers creep you out. But can you look at one the next time you see it when it gets warmer? You won't see one today. Maybe the next time you see a grasshopper and you think of what these locusts are capable of accomplishing. Like, man, what if the church moved like this? What if the church had that same mission, that same drive, that same unity? Oh, what a wonderful thing that could be. Y'all just go with me on this one. I know there's a spider. Some people really don't like them, and I understand that. Have you ever stopped to examine a spider web, though, before you ran into it? Sometimes it always, I know sometimes it doesn't always happen that way. The spider taketh hold with her hands and is in king's palaces. I marvel at spider webs. You think about that central portion that's designed to catch bugs, and it's super sticky. But all those thicker bands that run out to trees or wherever it's at, those aren't sticky. A spider can make strands that aren't sticky. They can make strands that are sticky. They can make strands that are weak and designed to be broken and wrap up a bug. They can make strands that put up to almost anything. I've seen, and maybe you've seen on television shows and pictures where birds are caught in spider webs. Stronger than steel. If we could perfect that, and just think of all the industrial applications for spider webs. Think about what this little thing is able to accomplish, the amount of building it can do. Again, being one of the least of God's creatures. They build strong. How do we as Christians build strongly? 2 Timothy 2:15, we study or are diligent, that we show ourselves approved to God, workmen that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing or handling the word of truth. Are we willing to work in the kingdom of God? Are we willing to open up our Bibles and get our hands dirty, so to speak? To really just dig in there to the meat of the Word. To build upon our lives a foundation a spider would be proud of. To build a web of righteousness that we just can't get out of. Matthew 7 and verse 24. Jesus said, whosoever heareth these sayings of mine and doeth them, I will liken unto a wise man who built his house upon a rock. Spiders, man, they build their webs on all sorts of stuff, on grass, on trees, on things that don't last. Are we going to build our spiritual home, our spiritual web, if you will? Are we going to build it upon the rock that is the Word of God? Are we going to build it upon the chief cornerstone, which is Christ? We have a more sure foundation than any spider in the history of the world. Can't we build a better structure? You think spiders, it's just amazing how they build these geometric designs that are able to accomplish so much. Can't we build our faith upon the faith and make something so much better and more powerful and stronger than any spider ever could? The Hebrews writer here of Proverbs says that you find them in king's palaces. King Lemuel, who wrote later in Proverbs, King Solomon. I wonder, is Solomon just sitting there kind of looking up in the corner? Look at that spider. Proverbs 30, chapter verse 28. A lot of times your writers, a lot of times the Jesus in his parables, what he is saying would have directly transpired with things that were around him. When he says, I am the light of the world, there were Jewish priests at that time lighting lamps around Jerusalem and the Temple Mount, and it made a great correlation in what he's saying. I wonder if the writer here of Proverbs chapter 30 is just looking up the corner at this spider spinning a web. while he's writing this down? I don't know. But anyway, he looks to a spider. You can find a spider anywhere, right? Even in your car, which is, in your bed when you go to sleep at night, you reach, turn on your light, and there's a spider web. Oh. All right, I'm going to stop talking now. Spiders are anywhere, right? That's what makes them so creepy. We ought to be able to find Christians anywhere and everywhere is where I'm getting to. Two passages you may not read a whole lot. You may just kind of skip over. They're toward the end of these books. You get toward the last half of these chapters, well, Paul's just talking to people. It's not important. Paul said, the salutation by the hand of me, Paul, remember my bonds. Where is Paul at? He's in prison while he's writing this book here, or this letter to the church at Colossae. The letter to the church at Philippi in chapter 4 and verse 22. All the saints salute you, chiefly those that are of Caesar's household. From the prison to the house of the emperor, you could find Christians in the first century. To the lowliest widow and beggar people. To chiefs of cities. Heads of synagogues. These folks were turning the world upside down. You could find Christians in every walk of life in the first century. Can we find Christians in every walk of life now in the 21st century? Are we doing all that we can to build up the church of our Lord in every demographic across the board? Sometimes we look at groups of people and we say, they don't need the gospel. We look at other groups of people and say they won't accept the gospel. Those folks over there, they live in $3 million houses. They don't need the gospel. This fellow I'm handing this blessing bag to, he won't listen to me anyway. You find spiders everywhere. Can we find Christians everywhere? And if we can, is that our fault? Is there more that we can do to make sure there are more of us? That's what the Great Commission is all about, right? To go for each one of us to reach someone else and bring them into the fold of Christ. Spiders build a strong web, but their foundation isn't quite sure. One of the least of God's creatures has this wonderful thing. What can we build with our faith when we build it upon the faith of the gospel and the chief cornerstone of Christ? When we do that, do we evangelize? Do we do what we can to make sure there are Christians everywhere? I'd love for every restaurant I walk into in Arnold to know there's a member of the church that was there, that works there. Every store, the same thing. Every office and workplace around town. I'd like to be able to walk into any building in downtown St. Louis and know there was a member of the church there. Or 2 or 12 or 50. Boy, what a wonderful thing that would be. Maybe you don't want to see that with spiders, but I'd love to see that with Christians. What can we do to help that? What can we do to build upon our faith in others? To make even a spider proud of what we can accomplish through Christ. Tonight we looked at the little things. And hopefully you have a better appreciation or at least knowledge of some of these critters. Great things have small beginnings. There was a man who was perfect one time who died upon the cross. He was hung between 2 thieves. Okay, happens all the time. What's the big deal? Well, they put him in a tomb. Well, so what? Everybody dies. Everybody gets buried. This man, who was the Son of God, was raised to walk in newness of life. He was resurrected. And to prove that we all can be resurrected, raised to walk in newness of life. That one instance in that one cemetery, in that one town, by the time we get to Acts 17, the Jews accused Paul of turning the entire world upside down. If you thought about that, you think about Jesus himself, Isaiah, the Psalms, so many messianic prophecies talk about how he was not going to be much. He's not going to be somebody the world is going to act on praise to. He's not going to be a lot to look at. He's going to be a common person born in a common town. But he's the Son of God. He's the King of Kings. He's the Messiah. Think about the things that he was able to accomplish. And he started life as a baby just like everybody else. The church, millions of people in Jerusalem on the day of Pentecost, a great feast day. And out of those 2, maybe 3 million people, only 3,000 obeyed the you know what I'm saying. They obeyed the gospel on the day of Pentecost. And look, 2,000 years later, we're still worshiping in the church of our Lord. Great things have small beginnings. Where is your faith this evening? Has it started that walk in the light? Have you been obedient to the gospel of Christ? You can do great things for the Lord. And everything starts small. It starts with an act of obedience. It starts with being baptized into Christ to put you on that walk. It's a submissive act. You submit to the will of Christ, having believed in Him, heard His word, being willing to repent of your sins, confess His name before men. Is that where your faith is at? Does it need to be baptized into Christ so you can start this process? But tonight, where are you growing? Are you growing? Ants can do great things, but you're bigger than an ant. Hyraxes are great critters, but you're bigger than that. If they can do that, what can you accomplish? Are you living up to your potential? Do you need prayers for strength and encouragement? Do you need prayers just so you can grow? Do we, as your brothers and sisters in Christ, need to lift you up before the throne of God to pray for you and with you for things that you have going on in life? It can be difficult. Just like those ants, sometimes sticks and rocks fall in our way and we lose our path for a while. Do you need to get back on track? You can do that tonight. Think about those little things as together we stand and as we sing.